Look closely at my face. I am 90 years old. And if you ask me if I was happy, I will take a moment before answering, because I have learned that happiness and comfort are not the same thing, although we spend our whole lives confusing the two. My name is Arnold. I was born in Liverpool, in a neighborhood of small houses and large backyards, where neighbors knew each other by the aroma of Sunday roasts in the afternoon. I lived in that city my whole life, graduated in accounting, worked for 40 years in the same downtown office, and was married to Delia for 47 years. Delia passed away 3 years ago. And since she left, I discovered something I should have discovered decades earlier, that I never truly knew her. I'm not talking about betrayal. I'm not talking about fights or falling out of love. I'm talking about something much quieter, and for that very reason much more destructive. I'm talking about the silence we choose when we're afraid to delve too deeply into another person. I met Delia in 1972 at a summer fair at the Allerton Community Club. She wore a floral dress and laughed in a way that filled the room. I was 38 years old, ready to get married, as they said back then, and she was exactly what I imagined I should look for. Elegant, educated, from a respected family in the neighborhood, daughter of a well-known merchant from Bold Street. Our courtship was what I would call today beautiful on the outside and empty on the inside. We had dinner on Fridays at the restaurant near home, talked about the weather, about relatives, about neighbors. We never talked about fears. We never talked about dreams. And that seemed completely normal to me, because it was what everyone did. We got married in March 1974 in a ceremony at Our Lady of Sorrows Church. Her family cried. My mother hugged me on the way out and said I had chosen well. I believed her. The first decade of marriage was, outwardly, exemplary. I worked a lot. Delia took care of the house with a dedication that everyone admired. When the children arrived, first Ronald and then Simone, the routine became even more predictable. Breakfast at 7, lunch at 12, dinner at 6:30. She washed, I mended, she organized, I paid the bills. Everything ran like clockwork, and I was proud of that. But beneath that well-organized surface, there was an ocean of things that were never said. And I, out of cowardice or habit, preferred not to dive in. There's a scene etched inside me in the middle of my chest like a splinter that never came out. It was on a winter night in 1982. I came home after a long day at the office and found Delia sitting at the kitchen table. Her eyes were red. The light was dim. She held a cup of cold coffee with both hands, as if she needed something to cling to. In that moment, I saw that she was suffering. I saw that she needed me, and I was afraid, not of fighting, not of making a mistake. I was afraid of the depth. I was afraid to sit beside her, take her hand, and listen to what lay beneath those tears. So instead I looked at the stove and asked, "Is dinner ready?" She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, stood up, and said it would be on the table in 10 minutes. I never knew what made her cry that night, and I never asked. That choice I made in the kitchen on that winter night was not a unique choice. It was the first of hundreds, perhaps thousands, of similar choices. Every time Delia tried to open a more honest conversation, I deflected. I changed the subject, made a joke, suddenly remembered I had to call someone, and she, being an intelligent woman, learned not to insist. She molded herself to the silence I built around us. On our 20th wedding anniversary, we had dinner at the same restaurant as always in downtown Liverpool. She looked beautiful in a blue dress, and the friends who came to congratulate us said we were an enviable couple. I nodded and smiled, and inside I felt an oddness I couldn't name. It wasn't exactly sadness. It was a kind of distance, as if I were looking at my own life from afar, as if it belonged to someone else. Ronald and Simone grew up watching that. They grew up learning that marriage is organized silence, that love is splitting the bills and not making noise. Years later, when they had their own families, I saw the same detachment in them. Simone barely spoke to her husband at family gatherings. Ronald responded in monosyllables when his wife tried to talk about feelings. I had passed on what I learned unintentionally and unknowingly. And that, I swear to you, is one of the things that weighs on me most. When I was 58, I came home earlier than usual one October afternoon. I found Delia packing a suitcase on the bed. My heart pounded. I stood in the bedroom doorway, unable to speak, and what I felt in that instant was not fear of losing the love of my life. It was fear of losing the routine, fear that the whole mechanism would stop working. She saw my face and said before I could open my mouth that it was just a spiritual retreat from the parish. 3 days in the Lake District with other women from the community. I breathed a sigh of relief. But as I went to help her close the suitcase, my eyes met hers for a second. And what I saw there was not peace. It was weariness. It was a quiet, old desire to be somewhere else, to be seen in a way I had never bothered to offer. I pretended not to see, and I asked nothing. There's a moment stored away back in the 90s when Ronald was about 16 and came home with that closed-off teenage expression of someone who doesn't know how to start a difficult conversation. He sat at the dinner table twirling his fork on his plate without eating. Delia noticed before I did, as always. She looked at him, then at me, as if asking me to take charge of the conversation. And I averted my gaze to the newspaper folded beside the bread. It was she who asked what was happening. It was she who listened to our son for almost an hour. I stayed in the living room watching the news, convincing myself that she handled those emotional situations better. It was a lie. It was just another escape. On our 40th wedding anniversary, a friend raised a glass at a restaurant in the Woolton neighborhood and asked what our secret was. I smiled, looked at Delia and said, "Never go to bed angry." Everyone applauded. She applauded too, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. And the real secret, which I didn't say that night and which I carry with me to this day, was different. We never went deep enough for real anger to surface. We never risked it. We never allowed ourselves to be imperfect in front of each other. And what seemed like stability was in fact absence of courage, absence of presence. Delia fell ill in the winter of 2018. The doctor said words I didn't want to hear properly, and my reaction was, once again, the same as always. I focused on the practical details, appointments, medicines, documents, tests. I thought the time had finally come to be different, to say everything I had held back. But when the moment arrived, my throat closed up, and she, even fragile, seemed to spare me, as if she knew I couldn't sustain the depth the moment demanded. And so the months passed, and the real conversations continued not to happen. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you are watching us from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you will ever hear in your life. 2 weeks before Delia passed away, she was very weak. She spent most of her time in bed with the window open to the patio where she always liked to tend her plants. It was a May afternoon, the sun that golden way that only the south of England has in autumn, and she was awake when I entered the room. I took the straw chair from the corner and sat beside the bed. I held her hand. It was thinner than I remembered, her fingers slender and cold, but she squeezed my hand with a firmness that surprised me. And then she looked at me with those brown eyes I had known for 47 years and asked in a soft voice, almost a whisper, "We had a good life together, didn't we, Arnold?" I froze inside, because in that instant, for the first time in decades, I felt with absolute clarity what the honest answer would be. I felt that the right thing to do was to say, "We had a comfortable life, Delia. An organized and outwardly beautiful life. But I never asked you what made you cry. I never knew by heart what your favorite color was. I was never brave enough to know what scared you in the middle of the night. I left you alone within our marriage, and that is something I don't know how to live with. But I said none of that. I looked at her, squeezed her hand, and replied, "Yes, we had a good life." She smiled. A soft smile, a little sad, like someone who expected another answer but had already made peace with the one she would receive. 11 days later, she passed away on a quiet dawn, with the window still open to the plant patio. At the wake, at St. Michael's Cemetery, friends hugged and spoke of good memories. My son Ronald gave a beautiful speech, full of the right words, and said that his parents were an example of love and dedication to us all. My daughter Simone cried on my shoulder. I stood in a dark suit, receiving hugs and saying, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." And inside, I was empty. Not of acute pain, but of an enormous absence, like a house that has lost its furniture and left only echoes. I returned home that night and didn't know what to do with the silence. 3 months later, on an August afternoon when I decided to reorganize the bedroom closet, I found a shoebox at the back of the highest shelf, behind blankets we hadn't used in years. Inside the box was a hardcover notebook, wine-colored, with the initials DAB in faded gold letters. Delia Ashworth Barnes. Her diary. I sat on the edge of the bed with that notebook on my lap for a long time before opening it. I knew there was a point of no return there, that what I read would change something in me permanently. But I opened it anyway, because at that moment I needed to know her, even if it was too late, even if she could no longer hear me apologize. The first entry I found was from 1989. Delia wrote in small, slanted handwriting, like someone who has a lot to say and little space to say it. She wrote that she felt invisible within the marriage, that she spoke a language I didn't want to understand, that she tried to tell me about the recurring dreams she had about her father, who had passed away early, and I always deflected the subject before she reached the deepest point. She wrote, "Sometimes I wonder if Arnold truly sees me, or if he only sees the woman who washes the dishes and takes care of the children." I closed the notebook, breathed deeply, opened it again. In 2003, she wrote about an afternoon when she stayed in the room crying after difficult news from a friend, and I had come home that day and asked if there was salt in the food, because I thought it tasted bland. She wrote, "He didn't notice. He never notices. And I no longer know if I want him to notice, because I've gotten used to keeping everything in here, in these pages, because here at least I exist." I had to stop again. I got up, went to the window, looked at the patio where her plants were still alive, some still blooming on their own, as if she had left instructions that the flowers still obeyed. And I cried. I don't know if there's a better word to describe what happened to me in that moment. It was as if 47 years collapsed all at once, in silence, inside that room smelling of blankets and mothballs. The last entry was from 2018, a few months before the diagnosis. She wrote with slightly shaky but clear handwriting. She said she had reached a peace, that she understood now that they lived parallel lives under the same roof, and that this had been a silent choice for both of them. She for staying, I for never crossing the wall I myself built. But she also wrote something that broke me inside in a way I can't quite explain. Despite everything, I loved him. I will always love him. I just wanted him to know that I was here on the other side of the silence, waiting. I carefully folded the last page, closed the notebook, and held it on my lap for a time I cannot measure. I thought of the 38-year-old man who entered a summer fair at the Allerton Community Club and thought he was ready to love just because he was ready to marry. I thought of the 47 years of breakfast with different parts of the newspaper, I thought of the countless times her hand tried to reach mine, and I turned away before understanding the gesture. Today, at 90, I live in this house full of furniture and empty of life. The silence that once comforted me now echoes in every room like a warning that arrived too late. I see young couples here in Sefton Park, near where I live, each looking at their phone, each in their own bubble. And I have an enormous urge to get up from the bench and say, do not confuse the absence of conflict with connection. Do not confuse knowing someone's work schedule with knowing that person's soul. Time does not slow down. The tomorrow we postpone today becomes the yesterday that can no longer be remade. And the later we promise ourselves rarely arrives in the way we imagined. If I could have just one afternoon back, I would sit with Delia in that plant patio, ask for a cup of tea and ask, tell me a fear of yours that you never told me. Tell me what you dream about when you wake up with a racing heart. Tell me what truly makes you happy, not what makes others happy when they see you happy. Just one afternoon. Just one conversation. But now what I have is the echo of 47 years of silence and the wine-colored notebook in the bedside table drawer, which I open sometimes not to reread, but just to hold, to feel the weight of what she kept, and I never asked to see. This is my story, the confession of a man who learned too late that love is not routine, not stability, not the absence of conflict. Love is presence. It is the courage to ask and to hear the answer. It is being by someone's side not only in physical space, but in that deeper place where people keep what matters most. Do not repeat my silence.